another episode of IHL in Film. Today is a very special episode because we're going to be talking about a Pakistani film for the first time in IHL in Film. And this is a film that everyone's been just rushing to cinemas to watch. This is The Legend of Maula Jatt. And before we get started on the discussion of the movie, I would just like to talk about the plot of the movie without giving too much away. So it's essentially a war between two Punjabi clans, the Jatts and the Natts. And we know, of course, the Jatts is sort of led by Maula Jatt and Natts are led by Noori Natts. And we have two international lawyers here. We have Aisha Malik, who is the team lead of the Conflict Law Center. And we have Ras Nabil, who is a research associate at RSIL. So before we get into the international law aspect of the movie, what did you guys think of the movie?
Okay, so I think we all watched the movie this weekend, and it was just such a nice thing to go and watch a Pakistani movie where the theatres being entirely full and it's all in Punjabi. And it was just such a good movie. Like, if you had told me that you were going to go and watch a Punjabi movie, which is a cross between Game of Thrones and Gladiator, and you're going to come out of it being like, that was a pretty damn good movie, I would probably be quite surprised. So yeah, positive reviews for me all around.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think having gone to see the movie and having first of all seen the reviews of the movie before actually going to watch, everyone was writing rave reviews about it, and there was such positive feedback about the movie that obviously you just had to go and watch it. And when I went to watch it, obviously Punjabi is not my first language, not the most fluent in it. And unfortunately, the cinema where I went to did not have subtitles. But I was able to understand pretty much everything. And that just goes to show that everything apart from just the writing, if you talk about like the set design, costumes, the overall cinematography, and just how the actors actually embodied the characters, I think overall you see why it is what they call like the new chapter in Pakistani cinema, and hopefully it leads to films of similar quality in future.
I agree.
Yeah. And it's so important to romanticize a language like that,
sure.
right? Because you came out and I was just thinking that this could have very easily been done in Urdu. But to do it in Punjabi and the way, like the Gandasa and showing Punjabi culture in that way, it was a huge celebration.
100%.
And I really liked it. Apart from Maya Khan and her very lackluster kind of Punjabi accent, I think that the rest of the cast did a really, really good job. And I think the writing was very good.
I agree. And I think a lot of us had very high expectations of the movie, given that it's been hyped up for like 3 years. But somehow it's surpassed even those for me, especially like the war scenes that we're going to be talking about. They were exceptionally well done. They were on Hollywood level for me. Like
Did you find that it was too gratuitous, the violence?
I think
there was a lot of gore.
For sure it was, but I think it wasn't done in a way that ordinarily we see in Bollywood and Pakistani movies to be very fake or like, just ketchup flying about. It was extremely well done, so I didn't mind that at all.
Yeah, I think we definitely did see some inspiration from Tarantino, definitely, with just the amount of gore. But I think that's also what, sort of added to the spectacle of the film. And again, I think at the end of the day, the film does romanticize this sort of violence and this, and it within the whole revenge narrative, it just adds that extra bit of emphasis on what the act of killing in the name of honor or like for the sake of revenge actually means. And so that just amplifies the effect.
So I think we've talked a little bit thematically, and like before we go into revenge and like war law, it was really interesting to me to see the masculine and feminine tropes in the movie because it was such a... Have you watched Fight Club?
I have,
So Fight Club was that celebration of masculinity, right? It was like that the modern male is so emasculated by this consumer culture, being in an office all day, and this is what men should be doing, they should be fighting. And it was a kind of celebration of that in a Punjabi level, which is like all about honor, it's all about vindication, vengeance, the killed parents narrative, too many spoilers, but and then the self-sacrificial mother, and then him going and, avenging, and it was all for me, it was more about Gladiator than Game of Thrones because there was no politics in the movie at all.
Yeah.
There was no like building alliances. There was nothing intellectual.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
it was just physical strength.
Yeah.
Who is the strongest? And that was in and of itself a kind of masculinity that we're quite used to seeing. Maybe we haven't seen so much of recently. And that's why Dado for me was the most interesting character because she
truly a feminist icon.
because I really loved the way they depicted her story from like Nurina's perspective, right? It was like you were going to be killed by our father.
Yeah.
I took vengeance on the man who was trying to bury you alive.
Yeah.
And in that character arc, it was that you are now going to be the leader of the tribe.
Yeah.
But because she was so masculine and she also killed people out of vengeance and out of, in a very punitive fashion, she then got killed for that.
Yeah.
But the scene where she is with Maula Jatt in prison, that was her transcending brute physicality. Because she was like, hey, let's build an alliance. What would our kids be like?
Exactly.
And I was just like, okay, that was the only moment where you saw that politics being shown and nothing ever happened to it. Like he was very not receptive to it. And in a way that played into
in mind.
And in a way that played to his honor because it was like, no, I'm very loyal to my damsel in distress made in my hands, so I won't be with you. But I felt like that for me was her art was the most I don't know, intelligent. I think her art was the most for the future, this is how war would be waged, which is that you would marry, you would build alliances, you would do all of that kind of thing. Whereas these two men were just
I think this is also why Humayma's character Daro got so much more attention and so much more love as compared to Myra Khan's character, because Myra's was again a mainstream character, that love story going on the side. Whereas Daro's was something people hadn't really seen in even Bollywood cinema here in Pakistan.
A very brutal woman. Who is like Kate. And we've seen that through history and characters like Cleopatra. But they're not famed for their beauty or anything. They're famed for their resourcefulness, I guess. And so they get a kind of different.
And I have to admit, after this movie, I was looking up who the original Daro was and who the original characters were.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched the original film.
I think having seen the original film, you do see a lot of the same character tropes. Obviously, it's building on the same story that the same story in the Legend of Maula Jatt. But again, the response to Daro's character in that film and the one here is pretty similar because this is a female character who is, breaking the typical stereotypes that we see in Pakistani cinema, in South Asian cinema in general. And this is the first time that we're seeing a woman who is thirsty for that sort of power, who's thirsty for that sort of revenge. But at the same time, like you said, she is equally resourceful and she's also trying to build an alliance actually with the Jatt clan. But again, that attempt is struck down because Maula Jatt's prime motive is to avenge the killing of his parents. And so I think that is an interesting sort of dichotomy that the film shows, where on one hand you have Myra Khan's character, who is again typical sort of what you would call feminine traits, and who is again defined, I would say, by her relationship to Maula Jatt. Whereas Daro very clearly is a character in and of herself, even though you do see that she is, her character does obviously depend on the relationship with her two brothers and obviously within the clan itself, but then she is there to try and make a mark. And you saw how her own leadership posed a threat to other members of the clan, which is why then they sought to kill her. Again, that was a sort of subplot of revenge as well. But
and I thought it was interesting that they made that the subplot and the reason why she was killed, not because they didn't want to bow down to a woman. Because I thought that I actually, when they were looking at her when she was being worn the turban, I thought actually that's what they were going to say. They were going to be like, we refuse to bow down to a woman, why should we? But actually they just held it against her, like, you killed my son. But so the reason we decided to do this in our film was because it brought out very interesting notions of revenge. And then I was thinking, okay, let's look at revenge through the lens of the laws of war. And it's kind of something that we have as like a very basic human element of society, vengeance killings, vindictive murders, and even like when you look at it historically, societies that have traditionally shunned war, they have only allowed it for this reason. That if you have to take vengeance for a wrong, that is permitted because it's meant to be retributive, it's meant to be deterrent in all of those ways. And when we look at the law governing the use of force, Article 51, it is really kind of a manifestation of that. If you attack a state, its civilian, its citizens, its infrastructure, that is an armed attack against which you can, use force in self-defense. So it's kind of that writ large, but the law says you're not allowed to do it in a punitive way. It has to be necessary, it has to be proportionate, and so we see the prohibitions playing out, but really, at its crux, it is about revenge.
As I would just want you guys to break it down a bit more for people who don't understand law as well as you, right? So would you characterize Maula's waging war like after that whole Batman origin story of friends? Would you characterize that him waging war against, let's say, specific people of the Natt clan as a disproportionate attack?
Okay, very interesting. So this is what I was thinking as well. So when the Khan comes and they're harassing the owner's daughter, who they're getting money from, he then kills the entire tribe, right? Like he kills 6 of them. So if we're looking at that as an armed attack, what would be proportionate in response? So we're looking at these 2 tribes as states to start off with. But under Article 51 of the UN Charter, what it says is you can act in self-defense against an armed attack so long as it is necessary and proportionate. So what does proportionality mean? And there are 2 debates about proportionality. One is that it is tit for tat, right? If I shoot your guy, you're allowed to hang one of mine. So ideally then, so Jatt kills enough 6 people. So then they should come in and kill 6 people.
But they're the ones who made the first move.
So the other argument is that it should be proportionate to the legitimate aim you're seeking, with the understanding that this could go beyond the initial armed attack, right? So it's not tit for tat. Especially if a force comes in and invades and occupies your territory, you might need to use more force in response in self-defense to get them off your territory. So, but again, we don't know what the exact numbers are. Like we don't know what a proportionate response would be. So going in, if you have 5 towns which are destroyed, you're allowed to go and burn 5 towns in a way, so long as it's proportionate under the laws of war.
Again, sorry, go on. Please go on.
Just building on that, I think when we talk about self-defense, there's a very fine line between what constitutes self-defense, obviously looking at necessity and proportionality, and then what constitutes an armed reprisal. And here, I think if we look at that example, I think we could classify it as an armed reprisal because at the end of the day, the movie is not about limiting violence. It's about it does glorify violence, and it does glorify acts of violence or conflict or whatever, because it associates that violence with honor. It associates that violence with respect. So Maula Jatt's aim when entering that scene is to send a message to the clan to say that, hey, you don't mess with me. And that is exactly why he killed all those people in that establishment, and he did so in a very brutal, like a very gory way. If we were to talk about proportionality, he wouldn't have had to do that if he would just been there as like a police force, for example, just like stop the guy from actually harassing the owner and his daughter. So I think at that sense it does become an armed reprisal, and that also goes back to the purpose of the law of war or the IHL is that it's there to regulate and to prevent these types of actions. And the law of war has developed because states have now come to the realization that this is not an adequate way to solve disputes. This is not the way where we don't now accept brutally killing huge sections of our population as justice. We don't consider it as a respectful act within conflict, and so that's why you have these controls of targeting as well, right? Where you make sure that you only target military objectives, and you only target, for example, whatever contributes to the overall military effort, and you don't target civilians. Here again, you could say that because they were all there supporting the clan leader, and they were also armed. So I think they would constitute military objectives. So maybe that does blur the lines a bit. But I don't know if you could talk about like the scene where where Natt brings the entire clan to attack the village.
When everybody was sling shots.
They really were.
What do you think of that in terms of like the armed reprisal argument?
So I think the way the armed reprisal argument works is that there is a prior wrong. So even when we look at it in the sense of that scene, the wrong was, trying to inflict sexual violence on an innocent civilian. And so you're correcting that, but you're doing so completely disproportionately, right? By killing 6 people. And secondly, again, it's like even if there has been a prior wrong where you have disproportionately killed so many people, you are then engaging in something which is disproportionate, and that is what the law seeks to prevent that type of escalation, right? Because you're then engaging in this cycle of like never-ending escalation, which could lead to God knows what point.
Okay, I have another question. Again, I don't know how international law would apply to this, but all that we've talked about, let's say we're talking about self-defense or we're talking about proportionality, these are in response to, let's say, attacks that are happening like right now. For example, the sexual violence that was happening in response to which Maula killed 6 people. But
so we'll be looking at that in the context of an armed conflict, I think. I don't think that would suffice as an armed attack.
Okay. But for example, things that have happened in the past, like Maula was a child when his parents were killed and all those people were killed. He's growing up and now he's waging a war. How does something like that has happened so long in the past and now you have the capacity, let's say, to attack?
That's a really interesting question, and also because I think one of the things that are often cited is that when you look at the law like this, in the sense of the use of force, armed attack and self-defense, is that you don't take into account the history of the conflict. So especially when it comes to Israel and Palestine, Israel will kind of keep the temporal time frame very, very narrow, and it will say that actually this rocket was fired, and they're like, no, you don't understand, this come after like a history of prolonged attacks from you. And even when it came to Israel and Hezbollah, when Hezbollah abducted and killed Israeli soldiers, which led to the Lebanon War of 2006, you had Hezbollah saying, wait, you're only looking at this in this narrow time frame, this has been going on forever, what you've been doing to us. So that is a very interesting question. At the same time, the temporal element is in some ways limited by the notion of necessity, right? If you have waited that long, is it really necessary for you to take action in self-defense unless the armed attack is ongoing? So if you have a situation of an occupation, the armed attack is ongoing, you always then have the right to self-defense. Otherwise, I mean, if something happens and then 30 years later you're like, wait, now I have the right to self-defense. Exactly.
But would that equation be complicated if we consider it as both the clans having ongoing tensions? Like we saw how obviously the Natt clan was a landlord for one of the establishments in the Jatt village. So I mean, does that complicate things? Does that sort of sneak into the law of occupation, or how does that?
And I also wonder because under the reason why we have all of these limitations under Article 51 is that we have this centralized framework, right? So the UN Security Council is going to be the place that you go. So there's going to be another tribe, which is actually responsible for being like, hey guys, like why don't you should come to me? I could have handled it, that kind of thing. But one thing I did want to flag, which I thought was quite interesting, was that we've really not seen any kind of this terminology again of revenge and vengeance. And the last time we actually saw it was when Qasem Soleimani was attacked by the US. And then you had Iranian leaders, Khomeini, come and say, we promise harsh revenge on the US for what they've done to us.
Yeah.
And it really reminds me of the fact that this is very personality focused. So even if you kill civilians or if you kill or if you attack a civilian infrastructure, the way vengeance works is that it is inherently personal. So if you have someone who is, so widely respected, that's when you see these like ancient notions come out again. So I think it's really interesting to look at it from that. Whereas here, especially in this movie, everything is personal. It's not really about the tribe. It's about like, do I want vengeance? You had that scene where like the tribe comes together, and then he kind of has to answer to them because they're like, this is in effect going to be collective punishment, right?
And in the way, exactly what they were afraid would happen. Sorry to cut you off. The whole town is destroyed, and it's just Natt and Nuri. Nuri and Maula left.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. No. That was it. Really, that was my point.
So if you guys were an international court and Natts and Jatts were to come to you after
we're going to be trying Maula Jatt in a docket.
Let's say Natts as a state and Jatts as a state. You were to deal with that, this whole, whatever has happened in the movie, how would you...
So we're with the ICJ. And we're...
Why not?
So what would Jatts claim? Would they say that this is an act of self-defense?
The thing is,
it depends how good the lawyers are, to be honest. Like, because right now, I'm not seeing the winning side. Like,
both of them are doing sanction, both of them.
Both of the guys are too proud to take it to their... They would want to resolve it themselves. They would not want to court in the first place. Okay, do we have any other remarks on the movie and other insights?
I think that's
pretty insightful.
Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we did, and I hope you all have seen the movie because this has a lot of spoilers.
Yes.
So we'll see you in the next...
Please go watch the movie.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see you in the next episode of IHL and Film, and from all of us here, goodbye.